So today is episode 1 of a new series I'm launching called Let's Make Some Music. The idea of it's basically behind the scenes on a lot of stuff that I'm working on right now. So since we're going to be doing a lot of recording in this series, I thought it would make sense to start it off by showing my crazy recording template. I'm using 2 programs and it's about as close as I can get to having a console in the box because, well, I don't own a console because I don't have console money. Anywho, there's a whole lot to show you guys. I'm sure there'll be a lot of takeaways for whoever's watching, so be sure to stick around. But Shakin' Gang, Mr. Jeff here, and welcome to another episode. Hope everybody's doing well in this crazy, I don't even know what's happening anymore with anything ever, so I just give up trying to think about it world that we're living in. So just before we dive into the computer, I just want to give you guys just a quick little backstory, and then what I'm going to show you guys in the computer will make a hell of a lot more sense. So I've been doing this sort of stuff since I was about 14, which goes back to about, I don't know, like the 1830s. Yeah, I'm old. So back in those days, not everybody had computers, Pro Tools was barely a thing, and if you wanted to record anything, well, you needed tape. So growing up, I had buddies that I used to jam with all the time, and the way we used to record is we ended up getting a Tascam, what was it, a D106, a little 6-channel mixing console, or was it 8? I don't remember. Anyway, and we had a couple of crappy mics. So basically, we would plug the Tascam into a cassette deck. We'd set up these couple of mics on the drum kit. We'd have my buddy play, and we'd have to record a little bit, kind of listen to it back, and we'd do that until we got the drum kit sounding pretty decent and even. Then we'd plug my buddy's guitar in, play it with the drums, do the same thing, add my bass in, do the same thing. And then once we were ready to go, then we would just hit record on the tape and play. Boom, done. That's how we had to do it. Not long after that, we were able to get our hands on a Tascam Portastudio. I don't remember which one it was. And again, home studios weren't a thing at this time. It was big studios, big consoles, racks full of gear, and tape machines. So that was my upbringing and my start into this sort of stuff. Now fast forward, I don't know, 153 years later, if I had the money for a console, damn right I'd have a console. But I don't, so computer's what we got. So my whole crazy template is built on that design. You got the source sounding good, you ran it through the console, made any little tweaks you needed to do, you printed it to tape, and that was it. You were done, you moved on to the next thing. Not like today where it's just plug something in DI and then spend the next 57 years messing with plugins and never coming up with a sound that you like. So it's that old school way of working that I've based this around. And just before we dive into the computer, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment, it makes the algorithm hate me a little bit less. The algorithm doesn't hate anybody. Or does it? With that said, let's dive into the computer and take a look at this craziness. Okay, so here we are, and yeah, where this crazy setup starts is in MainStage. I'm sure a lot of you are scratching your head right now thinking, wait, MainStage? Wait, what? Yeah, I know, but it'll all make sense, trust me. So basically, the long and short of the way this works is MainStage is my tracking console. Over here, we have my imaginary tape machine, and all this via light pipe feeds into Logic. So you have to think back to the way things were done before we had computers. You'd have a drum kit, bass, guitars, whatever set up in a live room. You'd have mics in front of them. They'd feed through the console. On the console, you'd add any little EQ that you need. If you need compression or something, whatever you needed to do there. That signal would then be sent to the tape machine where it'd be printed and recorded. And then the outputs of the tape machine would be fed back into the console. Same thing applies here with MainStage being the console and my imaginary tape machine. And then you think of Logic as playing back what's already been printed to the tape machine. So anything I do in MainStage, once it gets to Logic, those effects are baked in. So for me, that's the first problem this solves, because some of you might be thinking, well, why don't you just record in Logic normally, and when you like the effects or whatever you've applied, then just bounce that track down? Well, because now I'm just going to have a ton of extra audio files for no reason. Logic's going to record basically just whatever comes into the interface. Then you bounce that down with the effects. Well, now you've got 2 audio files. This eliminates a second audio file. And again, forces you to commit. Because if it sounds good here before it gets to Logic, well, that's 90% of your job already done. So the long and the short of the setup in MainStage is this. You can see I have the Waves NLS channel on all 32 of the channels. 32 is the max I like to use because, well, why do you need a song with 100 tracks on it? I'll never understand that. So in NLS, all the channels are set to the mic preset. This is the TG12345 console that, Beatles' Abbey Road, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon were tracked on. There's a couple of reasons I decided to go with that console. Everybody knows the saying, track on an Eve, mix on an SSL. Well, I wanted to do things a little bit differently. The other reason, as you'll see here, is I have the TG12345 channel strip. So in here we have a compressor, a limiter if we need it, and we have EQ. So doing it this way means I also have less plugins to worry about. So let's say one of my guitar cabs is mic'd up, it would come in through MainStage, go through the NLS channel, then go through the TG12345 channel strip. Or if I'm using an amp sim, I would just slide these two down and then just stick the amp sim here first. Then I would set this output to one of these tape outputs. And this is where the Kramer master tape comes into effect. Now on this, except for just a couple of minor tweaks, I'm basically just using the default settings. And the reason I'm using the Kramer master tape specifically for this, Kramer tape has no latency, so you can track through it. So now after it's left the Kramer tape, it then leaves MainStage via a light pipe output, and then it ends up in Logic via one of the light pipe inputs. So just a couple of quick notes left in MainStage, and then we'll move on to the Logic side of it. Now there's a couple of perks for me doing it this way. Now when I start a new song, then I'll save a copy of this template in with the Logic session for the song, so I don't have to have all these plugins loaded up in Logic. I just turn them on as I need in MainStage, and then when I'm done tracking, I can just shut down MainStage so it separates the processes. And if I need to go back and retrack something, I just pop the MainStage session back open. And with that out of the way, let's move into the Logic side of things. Alright, so moving on to the Logic side, this is my Logic template, how it opens up. And it's divided into a couple of sections. So the first section over here is called Scratch Tracks. So if we open this up, this is basically my pre-production area. So if I'm coming up with a song idea or working on arrangements, all that sort of stuff, everything's still rough, and this is where I do all this sort of stuff. So drum-wise, I use Steven Slate drums. Been using those for, I don't know, a number of years now. I have drums, but apartment. So my drums have actually got mesh heads and triggers on them, so drums are mostly me playing my kit, and then there's the odd part where I just program it on the keyboard just because it might be a little bit quicker if it's something simple. Oh, and before I go too far into this, some of you may be thinking, well, my interface doesn't have ADAT, I don't have two DAWs, I can't do any of this. You can actually all do this just using one DAW, and if you guys are interested, I can make a video showing you guys how you would set this up in like Logic or Pro Tools or whatever. If you want to see that, just let me know, leave a comment below, and I'll make a video on that. So when I come up with a song idea and I'm working on a song, something new, 99% of the time it starts off on guitar. So I'll lay down rough guitar tracks here, and then once I've got rough guitar tracks laid out, then I'll start working on drums. Now this kind of becomes a bit of a back and forth process because, well, I'm just one dude. I'm not in a room jamming with people, so you can't really throw ideas back and forth and, oh, try this, try that, right? So I've got to kind of do this on my own. But once rough drums are laid down, somewhere in between there I've ended up throwing down a rough bass line at some point as well. And then it just becomes a lot of that same stuff you'd end up doing with a band. Changing parts a little bit, changing the arrangement, and all that stuff is done in here. Then I'll sit down and do the final drums. Now once all the final drums are done, then because it's a multi-out instrument, then I'll just add all the different outs that I need from slate drums to get the drums separated. And just like in MainStage on all the drum tracks, I'll add the NSL channel on all of them, I'll run them through the TG12345 channel strip, and I'll run them through the Kramer tape. Now, I mean, the slate drums sound really good as they are, so when I'm bouncing the drums down, I really don't do a hell of a lot. Maybe just light compression. I'll take out low end on things I don't really need it on, like the overhead tracks, hi-hats, rides, things like that. But running it through those plugins just helps embed that sound of that TG12345 console that all the other tracks are going to have on it. So it just helps kind of unify all the sounds together. So when they get bounced out, they end up over here in the console section. And this is where they get routed to. This is where they're recorded. Remember I'd said that MainStage acts as the tracking console with the imaginary tape machine, and then Logic acts as basically the desk playing back what's coming out of the tape machine? That's what this console section is. So the final drums get printed over to here, and then once I'm ready to actually start tracking down the actual bass lines and the final guitar tracks or whatever else I need to track, that's all also done in this section. And again, all of that runs through MainStage and is printed into Logic. And just like in MainStage, you can see here we have our 32 tracks. That's just my track limit I set for myself. Usually I'm in and around 24, but sometimes if I want to add a little bit of synths or something for texture, then I kind of go above that, but usually I try to keep my counts as low as possible. And then from there, everything's pretty standard. I mean, drum bus, bass bus, these are just kind of dummy buses that I have if I have some piano or use some synths or whatever else I might want to use. Just a couple of dummy reverb and delay buses. Now the reference track portion actually gets a little bit interesting. You can see my reference tracks come in here. And again, that's fed out of iTunes via ADAT. And then there's a separate master bus. Now by default in Logic, this is the stereo output. This is where everything goes to. But if I start putting master bus compression and whatever other effects I might want to have on the master bus, if I put them here, then the reference track is going to feed through that. And I don't want to hear the reference track with all those effects on it. I want to hear the reference track the way it is. So you can see all the buses here, they bus out to bus 11, and that's, bus 111, and that's what this input is. So all of these buses use this as the master bus, and the reference track, it just goes straight to the stereo output, therefore bypassing anything I put on my master bus. And then on the channel for the reference track, you see the TG12345 channel strip on there again. The reason I put that on there is because everything's going to be colored by that console on its way in. And if you were in front of the actual console and hooked a CD player up to the console and listened back to some music, well, you're going to hear the color of that console. So that's why that's on there. It's not doing anything. I just turn it on. And then just a gain plug-in if I want to hear the track in mono, and then just a channel EQ just so I can see the analyzer if I want. And that's kind of that. I mean, and then all the buses have the TG12345 channel strip on them again as well. I didn't want to load all the tracks up with it because I'm trying to not use a ton of plugins. And besides, once you get good at recording this way anyway and making decisions in the front end, by the time you've got everything tracked, and even when you don't have any plugins on there, it's going to sound like it's almost already mixed anyway. So you really don't end up using a whole ton of plugins when you're mixing. And for me, that's kind of the whole point in all of this. I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars for outboard gear, a console, and a tape machine. So this is my way of having that same workflow, but inside the computer. So like I said, I'm working on putting some music out this year, and that's going to be part of this series. That's kind of the whole idea of the series, to kind of show you guys behind the scenes on how I work and how I do this stuff. So as I start putting out those videos, this whole system, because you'll see me using it, is going to make a lot more sense. So yeah, that's my crazy setup. All right, so that's my crazy recording setup. Like I said before, I'm sure there are a lot of things that many of you could take away from this, learn from, or even start implementing in your own sessions or your recording practices. So yeah, hopefully you got a lot out of this one. And again, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave me a comment down below. If you have any questions or anything, leave them down below too. Just want to thank everybody again for watching. Again, it means a lot to me. So until next time, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take it easy.